start.
Depending on what he did, or
Yeah.
67, or something, does something
but
right,
that's-
is it him too, or is it?
Oh, yeah, I know, I can see.
That's what we
The only
budgeted
question
for,
I
and that's what I
foresee
showed in
so far
2026. And
It's just related to
it might have seemed
the deferred.
close in 2026 compared to 2024, but more than likely that Cofield's contract would be increased.
Oh, you came up with that, because in the past, we've done such a
6% for both of us.
we've done policy. So I kinda talked through that, right, so you.
If you're
I know,
comparing.
right, yeah,
it's like
yeah,
you-
and that's where.
And so that's where I think maybe pulling up that other one of like,
Yeah.
here's a more, like, here's where we actually compared it,
So
4 or
so
5
you
months
have-
before 5 months, you know.
Mhm, yeah.
If we would have anything about.
So I talked through that.
But I think
Should be
there's.
good. No other concerns? Mhm.
You've got 7 months.
Oh, you're good. Plenty of time.
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, he didn't. Back injury. Oh. Yeah. I was told that their goal is.
Yeah.
Was that back? Yeah. Is that ever works? It's been worse. The left side. So yeah, so we didn't, I wasn't able to go hiking or based on so well, then.
The title company? It's coming out.
It comes with all of it.
Yeah. I don't know what that's. I mean, it's gonna be in our best interest. Of course. Right. And like they had a letter.
That's what I'm trying to.
Then I have it out.
Do you have an option?
Sorry.
Contract. But not if you have it.
Oh, so this is.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
kind of contract.
Yeah.
You were just
this whole, yeah.
I think it's one of the bigger ones. I think that's.
There you go.
We don't mark the one on this.
Okay, we're live.
Are we?
We did it. Except it doesn't say.
So yeah, maybe for, wait, that's the, or MBI. That's all in one level. Now it's
All those shots.
think of
Yeah.
package.
Yeah. That's what everybody has. I think that's these other, I think it's, we were working on.
So these are
That's
full.
not there, right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it.
That's about what's left from the big ticket items.
Well, only the people right behind me. Just they're very. Yeah. I've never rated a place in Rangers.
Yeah, it is.
Or, is it her parents or Julie said that they're going to.
Okay,
That's, and that's how we want it.
All of them.
but yeah, they're maybe. They're on.
Oh, shoot.
I told them that
Shot.
that's not right. They most of them total. That's not total.
All right, it is 6 o'clock. We will call the Sartell City Council meeting for April 14th to order. Please rise, Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, next on our agenda is the agenda adoption. I would take a motion on that.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. We have approval of the minutes from the March 24th regular city council meeting. Is there a motion to approve that?
Make a motion.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries as well. No special presentations tonight. We do have one signed up for community comment. Andy, if you wouldn't mind stepping to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and 3 minutes is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Andra, or Andy, Atterbury, and I'm here to tell you about how important Leander Boulevard is to the people in my apartment building. I live at South Grandview, 901 Heritage Drive, apartment number 227. Many of the residents there are retired. As you may have guessed, I'm retired too. Sometimes we seem to schedule our lives around doctor and hospital visits, so we drive on Leander a lot. My friends complain about how bad the road is, especially the ones who ride dial-a-ride buses. I learned rebuilding Leander is a high priority for the city, but getting the work done has 3 problems. 1, Tim from the street department explained the road has to be completely rebuilt. It's too narrow and the foundation is shot. 2, rebuilding the road takes a lot of money. 3, City Administrator Anna Gruber told me the city gets the money for Leander from the Minnesota State Legislature. Of course, I've got it all written out and it's stuck. State Legislature, and the city doesn't have the money yet. Because the money comes from the state legislature, I emailed State Senator Howe and State Representative O'Driscoll. I asked them to help get the money for rebuilding Leander. The people in my apartment building love hearing what I learn when I come to city council meetings. They tell me they want to keep working to get Leander rebuilt. The sooner it's rebuilt, the better. And I can't wait to tell them Sartell got the money. Woo! Also, last week, word about Leander spread fast in my building. The word was the city was fixing the potholes on it. Yay! Wonderful. Much better to drive on it. But we really can't wait to drive on the new Leander, so keep Leander as a very high priority. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and I can assure you it will remain a top priority. Thank you for that. Next is community linkage. We have 4 public hearings tonight, so we're going to work to be swift on them. No pun intended with the MS4 permit.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I don't have anything to present on this item. This is an annual requirement as part of our MS4 permit through the MPCA. So it's just a requirement allowing an opportunity for the public to comment on our storm sewer system. A few items that I just wanted to discuss: that we have an annual report that's generally due every year annually. However, the state has been redoing their permit submittal page since 2022. So we have not submitted an annual report since then. So from what I've heard, by the end of this year, they should have that submittal up and ready. So we'll submit for 2022, 23, 24. We keep all the data, so it's fine. So we'll submit that all at once, hopefully. And then also this year is the end of our cycle for our 5-year permit cycle for the MS4 permit itself. So we have begun with that application as well. And that'll be due the end of fall. We'll get that rolling. Another item, I have been presenting on this, or the community development team has taken over this item since about 2021. Since then, I have now transition this to the Public Works team as it better aligns with their objectives and goals. So over the past few months, I've been working with their team along with engineering, making sure we have a smooth transition. So all these items are now going to Public Works, and they'll be handling everything MS4 related. But everything's been set up, and of course myself and our engineering team are there for assistance. But really there's no action on this item, and it's a public hearing only. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on the MS4 permit, please step forward. Second call, anyone wishing to testify? Third and final call, anyone wishing to testify? I appreciate all you remaining seated. We'll close the public hearing on the MS4. Council, no action necessary. We have met the requirement of having a public hearing. On to variance for 3T housing.
Thank you. Okay, in front of you for review this evening is the following proposal. The applicant is proposing to construct a 48-unit multifamily apartment complex with multiple breakdowns of the rooms. There is 12 one-bedroom, 22 two-bedroom, 10 three-bedroom, and then 4 four-bedroom. The applicant is requesting this variance to provide 100% on the on-site surface parking in lieu of the 40% required underground or garage parking as stated within our zoning ordinance. Part of this application, and if you look in the resolution, is local participation. So the applicant is submitting to Minnesota Housing Finance, and part of the scoring criteria is local participation. So by having this variance, they would score higher on their application. Rob, if you could go to the next slide, please. So in this slide, it shows the breakdown of the units, the overall site layout. As you can see, this is off of 15th Street South and Pine Cone Road. Within the findings in the resolution, and I can go over those in depth later, you can see that there's conditions outlined stating that the development shall follow this site plan as provided, and if there's any significant changes proposed, Planning Commission and Council would have to review and ultimately approve those changes. Also, all the other R3 or multifamily housing requirements shall be met. If there's any further variances or rezone or anything that would arise that doesn't follow our zoning ordinance, it would have to follow the process of a variance, public hearing, Planning Commission review, and ultimately council review. Also, this property is not final platted and is part of the Furchy 600, if you recall. This area, so it's a large piece of property, so it needs to be final platted. As part of that, we would have to review at Planning Commission and Council. If the variance is approved and follows through with the platting requirements and that's approved, they do seek to apply for statewide affordable housing, which we have allocated, which we did get the allocation of almost 40,000. So if you recall, historically, we have spent all our money to date, and we have funded or sent our funding to Habitat for Humanity. Some previous council review and Planning Commission review and action. So if you go back to 2024, we did review, or council held a public hearing in 2024 for a rezone and variance submitted by TTT Housing. And this item was tabled and ultimately reviewed at the next council meeting. Council then reviewed the rezone request again and ultimately denied the rezone request. So since the rezone request at a different location was denied, the variance was not heard. So we did not discuss the variance at a council level last year. The applicant then submitted the same variance request for the same zoning relief, again for the covered parking. So that, again, they are providing no covered parking, it's all on-site parking lot parking. However, the location's different. They talked with city staff and we aligned them with certain properties that are already zoned appropriately. The Planning Commission reviewed this in 2024 and that was approved 3-1. And then Planning Commission just reviewed this again and recommended approval 5-0 at our meeting on April 7th. There are multiple factors of influence with this. Increased housing options, development fee generation. Anything with platting requires the payment of development fees. This would generate that. Building permit revenues. Of course, we're aware that any new building has permit revenues associated with that. Economic growth and stability, and then alignment with state and regional trends. So like I said earlier, the applicant has been meeting with city staff for over a year now, working on a location that's already zoned appropriately. And due to the complexity with the Minnesota housing application, this is the only other property in the city of Sartell that's already zoned appropriately that would qualify for that application. Further, Megan, who's representing the applicant tonight, she can discuss further on some of their previous applications with Minnesota Housing Finance and those results. Staff recommendation is to approve the variance request as proposed according to the findings of fact listed within the resolution. So again, I refer you to those. due to the current housing shortage along with the demand for multifamily housing at all levels of income. I would ask that you open the public hearing, save your comments for me after the public hearing. Anything city related I will handle. Anything building related or site specific I would defer to Megan to answer. Thank you.
Council, with that, we will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on the variance request for TTT housing, please step forward, state your name and address or affiliation.
Yep, Megan Carr with Sand Development, or representing TTT. Just want to say that I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. One of the things that's really important for this project is we did end up submitting this project, as you might recall, like Carrie mentioned, we came to City Council on a different site and we didn't get to the rezoning, or the rezoning failed. And so we ended up getting this site under contract and submitting to Minnesota Housing last year. The project was not, did not score high enough in our preliminary scoring to even be considered by Minnesota Housing. And so we met with them this winter to talk through this project because we do think Sartell is a great site for developing an affordable housing community. It hasn't been affordable housing in, an apartment building in Sartell hasn't been done, I don't think, ever. We have other affordable that was done many, many years ago, almost 30 years ago now. And so we went back to them and said, okay, what can make the difference? And this piece of waiving the covered parking as part of local participation is one of the scoring areas that we scored 0 in last year, and we would have an opportunity to score somewhere between 8 and 10 points, which is huge to get a project selected. And so our goal is really to get the most points possible so this project has a shot to be funded in this upcoming round. The round is due in July. July 10th is the application deadline. We'll find out in August or September if we made the first round cuts, and then the final award would be in December. So if this was approved, this variance was approved today, we would work towards an application in July. This project would likely not start construction until 2020. Let me think about the math here for a second. 2027. Maybe the end of 2026, 2027, and it's about a 14 to 16 month construction period. The project would utilize FIAS, so passive house design. So we would have higher energy standards. There would likely be solar panels on the roof. Each individual unit would have, or there would be a heat recovery system throughout the entire building. It would be built to some of the highest green standards in the area. We're currently hoping to start construction in about 3 to 4 weeks on a project in Waite Park that will have those same green features. So, like I said, the reason for our request is purely to get enough points to hopefully get this project selected. And we compete across Greater Min, so across the entire state. So we're competing against projects in Rochester, Duluth, Mankato, all over. I mean, some of those bigger cities, but also some small communities that just happen to score a little bit higher for whatever reason. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions as you guys open the public or have more discussion.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? Third and final call, anyone wishing to testify on the variance request for TTT housing? Seeing none additional, we will close the public hearing. Council, what questions do you have for developer or staff?
If possible, I'll take the city questions related to me first and keep your developer questions for Megan, and we can address those. Rob, can you just go to the next page just to show an overall concept? Thank you.
Carrie, what has been our history as it relates to affordable housing type projects and some variants and some different requests that have been made in the past?
We have not received a variance request tied to affordable housing, nor have had an affordable housing project in a very long time, over 30 years. We do have some affordable housing options that have transitioned from privately owned to affordable housing from a single family perspective, but not from an apartment perspective like this.
Carrie, isn't there, they call them twin homes at Roberts and 7th Street South? Aren't those, I'm not sure how we're defining affordable housing, but they're not market rate.
Correct. This is
What's
just,
the difference?
yes, this is just strictly tied to this funding option, the Minnesota Housing Finance of, it's a recorded deed restriction and things like that. Sometimes they transition and to affordable housing, but no variance has been requested.
So no variance has been requested, but I guess I wanted to make sure I clear, we do have affordable housing in our community today.
We do.
So we've got a couple different options between twin homes and apartment buildings. Again, I'm not sure on the A on the variance or B on the deed stipulation, but
There are other options. I don't know about vacancy rates and things like that. Generally, the Stearns County
Sure.
has those numbers.
Carrie, Megan talked about some of the energy items, solar on the roof, others. From what we know now, are there additional variance requests that may come as part of the building process? Or is it too early to have that discussion?
From what I'm aware of in the discussions I've had, this is the only variance request at this point.
Okay.
Typically, we review everything during a site plan approval process. If it's not upfront, generally they know our ordinances and we like to catch it ahead of time.
Right.
Prior to site plan submittal, because that would mean they're already going through the platting process. So if there would be another variance, I'm unaware of it and we'd have to follow the same process.
Okay.
Carrie, in non-affordable housing type funding, 40% coverage, it seems like a pretty low barrier for our city from most developments that I see. Have we made those for normal builders in the past? Has this been something we've done on a case-by-case basis in the past?
They've all provided the adequate parking that we've had since we've had this ordinance in place requiring the 40% underground or covered parking, which can be accomplished with actual underground or garages that we typically see.
And to your recollection, has there been another request that has been denied in the past? They've all met it, but has anybody even requested?
Not since I've been here and not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Since we've had this ordinance in place, which is, I believe, almost 10 years or so.
Any other questions for staff? Pat?
Carrie, so per the variance application, it's intended to address extraordinary, exceptional, or unique situations. What is that in this case, other than a desire not to build garages?
The unique situation, and I do appreciate it, it's a gray area, which we always seem to find ourselves in. But the unique situation with this property specific is that they're applying with that Minnesota Housing Finance that we have never had come in front of us for approval or had any built with that in the recent past. So that is what is unique to this situation. However, I understand interpretation may be different.
Yeah, I mean that's a funding request. I mean, if we grant this, is it in a sense, is it not a financial consideration that we're giving?
I will defer that answer, I think, to Megan, just because she can talk further about how removing the parking, the covered parking, whether it's underground or with garages, also frees up money to invest in other building factors like she discussed in solar panels and other energy efficiencies that they've reinvested essentially. So I'll let her speak to that. But within the findings of fact, number 6, I think is what you're tying this to, is one of them. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. So this isn't requested solely on the economic considerations, but it is part of where they can get some local support, and that's done through the variance. There are some other ways that I'm aware of that this has been achieved in the past for local participation through fee waivers, whether that's development fee waivers, building permit fee waivers, donation of land, whether it's city or developer. So there are other avenues. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
No, I mean, yes, but I think it keeps coming back to me. It sounds a lot like a financial consideration would be the primary reason for the variance here. The question, you said we've had this ordinance for about 10 years. What did we require before that?
I would have to look back. I do not have that on the top of my head.
And what's our rationale for having that? Why do we require that?
Typically, it's from a storage need perspective. We've seen a lot of apartment complexes, if they haven't had or don't have garages or enough garages, items are stored outside and then thus don't meet our other nuisance ordinances or storage ordinances, and typically fall to needing to address it from another zoning perspective. Also, the push is from the builder. A huge desire is to have a garage from the occupants. So generally, they provide at least the 40%. The most recent apartments off of Buda Boulevard were higher than 40%.
Okay, so I'm just trying to establish, there's legitimate reasons why we ask for this, and it's desirable. It's not just a burden on the developers. So, yeah, I guess you answered my questions, but to me, it still sounds a lot like a financial consideration for a variance.
Any other questions for staff? And or are there questions for the developer?
Mayor Fitzum,
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. Megan, you had mentioned that you've worked in, or throughout the state, there's other applications to this process. Are you aware of other communities that have passed a variance related to this, tying it to the application process? Or most go down the permit fee waiver route, perhaps?
No, it's a combination. I have not specifically done one with waived parking, but many of the cities we work in in Greater Min, do not have a covered parking requirement. And so when we started looking at this project, to be frank, we were kind of thinking of ways that we could score higher and make it a very competitive application. And we noticed the covered parking. That's something we talked with staff about, asking for the waivers specifically because we were hoping that could count towards local participation, because most of our Greater Min affordable housing projects do not have covered parking, because when you talked about the market rate housing, they charge extra for that apartment or that covered parking. So it might be, I don't know what it is in Sartell, but it could be $50 to $75 a month for every garage spot, underground or external garage. And when you're talking about affordable housing for an individual that might be on a voucher or individual that's on a fixed income, $50 to $75 a month is more than they can afford. And so it's not necessarily a benefit to the resident because they can't necessarily afford that. And so the parking is really surface parking primarily in this area. We just built a project in St. Joe in 2020 that has all surface parking. It's very similar design. It's family housing. We had no problem leasing that building without covered parking. We have done, in other communities, we've done instances where the city, in St. Joe for instance, the property that we developed on, it was a tax forfeiture property, and so the city acquired the land from the county in tax forfeiture, and then we paid a reduced purchase price for that. We've done instances where, like, we're working with an HRA right now in a different community to purchase. We have the land under contract. They're going to enter into a purchase agreement with us and then sell it back to us for $1 or $100. And so the difference in the valuation, we can count towards local participation because they are paying for that actual price. We've done instances in other communities where the fee waivers can be $500 to $700, $800,000, and they've waived those, and that counts for enough points for this. And I can assure you, I understand the financial piece of it. This is honestly due to points. Like, we are looking at every possible avenue, and if we thought that waiving your building fees or waiving other fees would amount to enough points to potentially get the project selected, that's what we would have asked for. We think that this is our best chance of getting the project selected to bring affordable housing options and very low affordable housing options. Some of these units will be as low as 30% rent units. We would have done that. So
Right.
I just, yeah.
Tim?
So
Just more clarification on the points and how they equate to the covered parking. How do the points add to the point? I mean, because you take covered parking away, it gives you more points, or is it a valuation on the money?
it's evaluation. So we hire a third-party construction estimator to estimate how much garages would cost if we were to build them. And that difference between the surface and what the garages would cost to build, we can count towards local participation, because the standard in the city of Sartell is the 40% cover. That's why we can count that difference. So,
Sorry, I guess as a follow-up to that, and I don't want to maybe too far in the weeds on it, but is it a checkbox of local participation, or is there actual dollar amount or a sliding scale of?
it's a percentage. So it goes, it's a percentage of the total development cost of the project.
Okay.
And so
And so you're saying, hey, the valuation of the garages is far greater than the permitting fees if the city were to go that route.
yes, because I don't know what the permitting fees in City of Sartell is, but let's just say they're, I don't know, for this building, maybe $50,000 or $75,000. You can't build, I can't do the math very quickly, but you can't build 40 garages for that price.
Sure.
And so that it's significantly different.
From the affordable housing perspective and keeping these units at those pricings, can you walk us through a little bit about the criteria and the length of time that criteria would be in place?
Yep, so a minimum of 30 years is the criteria in our scoring, like we've been talking about tonight. One of the scoring criteria that's worth 9 points, like I just have a lot of these numbers memorized, is if you extend that to 50 years. So we would enter into a land use restriction agreement that would be recorded on the property, that this property would remain affordable at or below 60% area median income for 50 years. And that would be entered into when we place the building in service. So that would be at the end of the construction, is, you know, essentially at the end of the construction, once we start leasing the building, when that would be placed into restriction.
Mayor Fitz, some more additional question. I just want to make sure council understood that the city has a separate pot of local housing aid that we were talking about. Is that approximate 40,000? We've given 80,000 to Habitat for Humanity in previous years, so it's separate from this application process. And Megan, maybe talk the council through, if you're successful and selected through this process, what is there to gain from from the project? I don't know if it's sand companies or the development, or is it the occupants that gain from it, or what exactly are you applying for?
Yep, so when we apply in July, we apply to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency through the state. Every state is allocated federal housing tax credits based on their population, and then each state prioritizes where those dollars are allocated. So we in Minnesota, utilize a qualified allocation plan. That's where it comes down to the points. So it's all about the highest scoring projects get the tax credits. And so by leveraging and getting as many points as possible, we have the best chance of having this project selected, which then brings in, this project, I was trying to look at the numbers before we jumped in here, but it'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million project by the time we got through everything. We would work with Minnesota Housing, would likely be our first mortgage lender. They would potentially bring soft money to the table, which could consist of state or federal money that would be available. If, you know, they go through and they allocate how they best see fit. So if they allocate tax credits, there might be several $1 million in soft money that's available. We would work with a investor, so that's usually a bank, so like a Wells Fargo, a US Bank, some of the other local banks may be interested in buying the tax credits, so they buy those at a percentage of the dollar, and then that money goes directly into the project. We, as in Sand, I introduced myself at Sand Development, so we would be the general contractor with Sand Construction. Sand Architects would be the architect, and then we have our own property management team that would manage this. Every single resident that would apply to the building would not pay more than 60% area median income or lower. Many of the units are lower than that of their rent. And then every applicant over the age of 18 or 18 and older has to go through a third-party verified credit, criminal, and background check. And then they also have to be income qualified, meaning they have to be third-party income qualified. We go through and we verify all their assets, all their income to make sure that they do meet the requirements of that.
Is that done yearly?
It is done when they move in or when there's a change of events. So, which then what that allows people to do is it allows you, if you all of a sudden next year you made $20 more and you tipped over the scale, you can't necessarily afford a market rate unit for $20 more. But per this program, you would be disqualified. And so because the entire building will be 100% tax credit occupied, it is not done annually. It's only if there's a change of events. So if they have a change of household size and they have to move a unit, then we would have to go through that process.
From a public safety perspective, is there, I guess, if you have issues with a tenant, is there a eviction process or anything, and any history? It
goes through the same process that any apartment building. We follow fair housing requirements. We work with, we have our on-site property management team work directly with public safety if there's any concerns. You know, it's no different than any other household, so there might be instances where there's domestic violence or whatnot. I'm not saying that's regular, but that is something that does come up occasionally, and we encourage the on-site staff to work directly to make sure that we're maintaining all of our residents' safety. If there's any concerns from our end, I will be one of the owners of this building, and so I'm available. They can call me at any time. We hold that promise to all of our cities that we work in, that if you have any concerns, please reach out to us and we can help that. But obviously the on-site manager is your best source of, resource immediately, but we're always available. We're just down the road. I mean, I was just near our corporate office today, and it's less than 10-minute drive from here.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Megan, how realistic are the concepts here? I mean,
these are from other buildings we've recently done.
Okay.
So the one, you're gonna maybe catch me on which projects they are. The rendering is one that we've done for a project in concept. It's actually, that project has not been built. Something similar will be built in Waite Park. The ones on the bottom I think might be from Edison, which is in Roseville, Minnesota. We have 2 phases there. We also recently built a project in Plymouth. We have 2 phases in Dayton, Minnesota. We just opened a project in St. Joseph, Shakopee. I think where else we've recently built. We're hoping to start a project in Roseville in June or July. No, sorry, not Roseville, Rockford, excuse me. We have 3 phases in St. Michael nearby, and those are all similar financing. We worked through similar process with City Council. St. Michael, actually, I didn't do the first phase. I did the second and third phase buildings, and there were a lot of questions on the first phase. And when we came back to the second phase, we asked for quite a bit of money to try to get the project funded through waived fees, and it was really successful that we had actually ended up doing a third phase in that building. So all 3 of them went through new funding rounds. Those are some that are like near.
On the last page, there's a really nice looking sport court and amenities.
Can you?
I don't see that in the, I guess, overall site plan.
It actually is in there. This is actually, so I'll just kind of give you an idea. So oh gosh, now I'm gonna forget here. The one on the left is from a project we just built in Iowa. The one on the top right is from a project, and that's our project in Plymouth. And then the bottom left, I think, is Shakopee, and then the other one is just a typical living room for us. But can you go back to the, would you mind, Rob going back, or who has, I don't know who has the control? Okay, would you mind going back to the site plan? And on the bottom, or the southern side of it, if you zoom in to this area where it says picnic area and tot lot. Yep. So we actually designed this space here. That tot lot is that playground area that we saw. And we actually designed the space. You can see there's a lot of open area to the south of it to include a sport court and a garden area. It's not shown on the site plan because it's one of those things that we typically like to make sure that we have enough money to cover all of the necessary items. And then right now, for the last several projects, we have tried very diligently to make sure we have room to put a sports court, and we usually include a 4-square area because this is family housing, so there's kids that live there, so we want to give them a place to be able to play. So it is not shown on the site plan. If that is something that is really important, and we get through this process and we get selected, when we come back for site plan review and platting, I know that it will be on there. If nothing else, it'll be on there as an alternate. I know City of Waite Park, when they went through their process, they said, well, you have to build that. So that is something that you could consider, but that's actually in their approval process that they wanted to make sure, because we weren't very close to a park, so they wanted to make sure we had those amenities.
Yeah, that was the basis for my question, is there is a park, but it's probably half-mile or better from this location, and so certainly could be a challenge, but.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the playground equipment, for whatever reason, that layer must have been missed, but that is the area for the actual playground equipment.
Council, any other questions for the developer?
Right.
Tim?
So, Megan, can you walk me through the process that you apply? Let's say it's don't get enough points, or you get denied. Mm-hmm. You're going to come back and resubmit, or how do you readjust then, or do you come back and say we need fees waived? I mean, what's your plan of attack on something like that?
Well, we did submit last year without any local participation from the city. We did have the HRA provide some voucher units, which does help our application. And like I said, we didn't even score high enough where they scored it. They said, you're too low, you didn't even pass. I think we passed the first round maybe, but we definitely, when we came back and we said, hey, can we talk about points? They said, oh, we didn't even score your project. So if we didn't get selected this upcoming round, and if you choose to waive the parking and we didn't get selected, I think that we would come back and we would say, hey, we want a shot at one more year. If you say, well, we're not going to grant the waiver, and we still choose to submit, I think I can safely say, based on last year's application, that I don't know that we will have a chance at having the funding, or the funding, this project selected. We did that last year in the hopes that maybe we would kind of slip in there with a lower ask, or that maybe there would be some projects that were lower funded or lower scoring. And it was very competitive last year, and I would anticipate that to be the same this year. And it's very competitive every year, but every once in a while there's a year where a project just kind of slips in because it's got a lower credit ask and they have leftover pullers. And I don't think that's feasible for this project. Does that answer your question? I guess we would reevaluate it next year if we didn't.
So following up on that, you're saying this variance is the difference between probably not even getting scored and then getting approved? You think
Yeah, and
this variance makes all that difference?
And I can say that because we did it last year, and that's exactly what happened, and there's not many other areas within the scoring application that we haven't already evaluated and maximized as to the extent possible.
Mayor, if there's one last question. So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly to answer Tim's question, if not funded through this process, you would discontinue the project altogether? Or would you come back and propose garages and try to complete the project as a market rate, or it's solely dependent on this application process?
Yep, as of right now, our plan would only be to move forward on this site if it was selected as a tax credit funding project. And I mean, yes, we could choose to submit with the garages like we did last year. Last year, we drew up this exact same site plan, we put garages on it, that's what we submitted to Minnesota Housing with no local support, and it did not even get past the point of scoring, so it costs anywhere from, just as an idea, anywhere from like $50,000 to $75,000 to submit an application with our time and out-of-pocket expense. And so it's not just like, hey, you submit this project, it's a lot of time. We spend hours and hours and hours evaluating every single point, backing it all up. So to spend that again on a project that we just don't realistically think has a chance, it doesn't make good business sense.
Any other questions for the developer? Thank you. Council discussion. Before us is a variance request to allow 100% surface parking. Or said differently, a deviation from our 40% requirement. I guess I'll chime in quick. I absolutely recognize the need for workforce housing, as we take on and are fortunate enough to grow commercial, industrial, manufacturing within our community. Like, it's an absolute need for us. It's an area that we do lack. So I think we can all confidently say that the demand is there. But I would also say that I struggle with the lower amenities, or the absence of a garage amenity for this type of housing. Everything from snow in the winter cold to just plowing, right? So snow event, all of those vehicles have to be out on would be, I believe, 15th Street South. In order for the parking lot to be cleared, there's just a lot, I guess in my opinion, a lot into it without having some underground or closed parking. And so that's what I'm hung up on is, again, I believe absolute need for our community, for the broader region. I would just say I don't love how this variance looks, but at the end of it, it's dollars and cents, and we know that real estate costs in our particular city is higher than others, or is maybe a disadvantage for this type of development compared to our neighboring cities. Those are my thoughts. I don't know, any others? Judd?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I think there's a need. I think 40% covered parking is a pretty low barrier in our community. I think that, if you look at a lot of the developments, I would assume they're a little bit higher than that on the forefront. So we already are pretty aggressive with only having that as a condition. That said, to get affordable housing in our community, we're going to have to make some sort of assessment. I'm worried more about a precedent setting and fairness to other builders as we kind of work through this being a 50-year commitment specifically to Minnesota housing and financing, gets me a little bit closer to being able to consider that. But I do think it's needed. I do think we have to have a plan and do something specific to actually have it happen here. And this is one option. So.
Yeah, I struggle with the idea that a variance is the way to do this. You've made a compelling case on why we need this. I think you're a very responsible developer. You know what you're doing. You're experienced in all this, but it seems to me that there might be other ways to get there. I know you're telling me the funding requires this, but I'm not sure a variance is justified, under the criteria we've set. Is this criteria the city of Sartell sets, or is this a state criteria for how you get a variance?
The findings of fact are based upon state statute. So the way we get to those findings and the results are specific to the actual application, but the underlying, essentially the first sentence of each finding is a requirement by state statute.
Okay. Yeah, I too worry about the precedent that we'll set that, in the end, this whole variance request seems to be centered around funding and making the project work financially. And so, per what we state on our application, that's not a legitimate reason for a variance. So, I would struggle to approve it, on those grounds.
If I could add, I know at Planning Commission we did speak, I think it was definitely over an hour, closer to probably an hour and a half about this topic, and a lot of it was around establishing a precedent. As we're familiar, any variance has to follow the standard process, and we were trying to get past the point of, okay, the next apartment complex that will be submitted, they'll ask for the same variance, and how Planning Commission was able to get over that aspect or that idea was that this is specific to the housing application that they're seeking, making it unique. I just wanted to add that was one of the reasons how Planning Commission got to that 5-0 approval last week.
What's the timeliness of this request? Is it?
From my understanding, it's pretty timely. I think their application is due July 10th. Last year, if you recall, we did table it and then bring it back. And as you guys are acutely aware, I'm leaving shortly. So if we would table this again and come back and have a revised discussion or anything similar, I may not be here to answer those questions.
Right.
Tim?
I agree with the need and the process of this review, and we do need affordable housing. We need, workforce housing, however you want to phrase that. I know there's plenty of apartments around the state that don't require 40%. I know that's pretty unique to our city, and I think we set that precedence ourselves, which in turn puts Sartell where we want to be as a city and have certain standards. But I also know that the success of a building like this is as crucial to the fabric of our city as it is to have covered parking or not. I mean, I think that we need to have that affordable option in town. I know there's plenty of places that don't have covered parking and are very successful and deal with snow and removal and all that. So I don't see that as quite of a barrier point, but I'm not sure that I understand Megan did a great job explaining to me how the point system works, and by giving the equity within the removal of the garages stands on its own. I'm not sure that's going to carry this over the finish line in general with the housing side of things. I think it's a good statement and a good attempt to do it, but I don't see any problem having this location, and the product in Sartell is needed. I think it brings an asset and a value to our community, and regardless of the parking or not. So I would lean to the approval of the variance, but I understand the concern, and I'm not so worried about precedents with other developers. They have to justify it, and they can stand in their time in front of us to ask for something. And if they make a valid claim, then maybe we'll listen to it, but I don't know if they're going to fall into the same category as this housing going forward. So can it be successful? Absolutely. Is the snow plowing issue going to be that's really the residents have to deal with that more so than anything inconvenient wise, but I think it's a good placement, and I can see where the planning commission struggled to make that decision, and I like their recommendation.
If there's no other questions, I guess I would look for a motion and we can continue to have deliberations. Is there a motion on the variance for TTT housing?
I would make a motion to approve it.
There's a motion to approve the variance as stated. Is there a second?
I'd consider seconding, Tim, if you would amend to require the sports court and the outdoor activities for the families as part of that.
Well, that will be back on the site plan at that point, correct?
We can add it as a condition. We have conditions A, B, we can add it C. And then we look at it when the site plan is submitted.
So would you want me to wait for that or no?
I'd like it to be part of the approval of the variance, that if it's not able to be done, then the variance would fall off.
Okay, I can make that motion.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. The motion is inclusive of what's been presented, along with item C, which is requiring the sport court and what did we call it?
Outdoor play
Outdoor
amenity.
family amenities?
Asking for further clarification. We have a sport court identified as a family amenity. Is there anything further?
The playground?
Call it
Picnic.
playground.
Playground, picnic area.
Willing to amend your motion? Willing to second?
Yep.
So item C will include sport court and playground. All right, we have a motion and a second in support of it. Is there further discussion or deliberation? I would tell you that I came in tonight probably with less support, but as I think about the overall need and the, you know, how do we as a community continue to grow and grow commercial and manufacturing and other jobs, this is absolutely part of it. And so I think with what we've got in front of us, I can support it. I'm hoping with all of the findings of fact and the 50-year requirement that it is not a precedent setter, but I guess time will tell on that. Anything else? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That carries 4-1.
Thank you.
Next item for public hearing is the preliminary and final plat for Northern Meadows Plat 2.
All right, moving on. Further, we have the preliminary and final plat for Northern Meadows Plat 2. As you can see here, it is just a little piece of the furthering phases of Northern Meadows. The applicant has met with city staff on multiple occasions discussing the Northern Meadow phases and the development process in general. At the time when Northern Meadows was first preliminary and final platted, the main property where the home is located on was not owned by the developer. Since then, the developer has purchased that home, and they have received a bunch of inquiries related to the marketing and sale of that property. Most people assume that the shed is associated with that lot. And Rob, if you can go to the next slide, please. You can see here that it would essentially be combining part of what was preliminary platted for Northern Meadows Plat 1 and this new home that was recently acquired by the developer in creating Lot 1, Block 1 that you can see there. The total plat is 1.69 acres. 1.35 is allocated for the actual lot, and then you can see the right-of-way dedication for the county road there as well. The access will still remain off Northern Meadows Lane there. You can see that there's a driveway that goes right up to the right-of-way that's existing. It is not an access point, it is just existing there. And the access is only allowed onto that Northern Meadows lane, as addressed by the Stearns County Highway Engineer comments as well.
Sorry to clarify, will that be closed off then, or it stays until
It is
the
not
future?
there. It's just a driveway that was once used and since been abandoned. There is still only one access, and it's on Northern Meadows Lane currently. Same for the shed. The shed will be accessed and provided off of Northern Meadows Lane there. This request, as I stated earlier, is at the request of the applicant because all of the inquiries are asking for that shed, and they believe that the best use of that property and bringing the overall lot into compliance would be combining it with the home. They also have expressed that they plan to improve the aesthetics and the exterior materials of the shed to match the home that was recently redone with siding as well. So they plan to bring that up to city code and match our city code. Everything then would fall into a conforming lot per city standards. Planning Commission did review this last week. They recommended approval of the plat, the preliminary and final plat, and all comments have been addressed by city staff and county staff from this standpoint. Just looking back and in the future, this is the second phase for Northern Meadows, so we did review and approve the first phase of Northern Meadows, and we anticipate the third phase coming in the future for the overall development, but this is just lot 1, block 1 for now. Any questions, I'd take them after the public hearing, please.
We will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on the preliminary and final plat for Northern Meadows Plat 2, Lot 1, Block 1? Please step forward. Second call, anyone wishing to testify? Third and final call, anyone wishing to testify on the preliminary and final plat, Northern Meadows Plat 2, Lot 1, Block 1? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Council, any questions on this item? This is pretty straightforward. We'll look for a motion.
So moved.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, jumping at that. We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item carries. Fourth and final public hearing, we have preliminary and final plat for Vantage Point.
Thank you, Rob. If you could just zoom in just a little bit just to see the overall location. Zoom in. Thank you. All right, so this goes back to 2021 and probably earlier than when I started here, but we've been exploring different development opportunities on what we've called Vantage Point. So we've provided guidance on land use, zoning, planning, development-related ordinances, and since then we did, if you go back to January, approve our orderly annexation agreement. This was part of the parcels identified to be annexed. We did annex that, and that has since moved forward development of this particular property. So following that, the property owner is at the point of submitting the preliminary and final plat as they have found a use for a portion of the property. Rob, go to the next slide, please. You can see on the plat provided that Lot 1, Block 1 has a use identified by the developer, thus resulting in preliminary and final platting it. You can see Lot 1, Block 1 there, and Outlot A for future development. Outlot B, a little triangular piece to the top of your screen there, is for future right-of-way for our realignment of Leasock Drive that we submit with our bonding request to the state annually, and in the future, hopefully we'll get that realignment, but they have planned for the future of that realignment. Some items included within your packet, there are some deferred assessments going back 20 years or so. There's 4 of them, I believe, identifying totaling up to $140,000 of deferred assessments from previous projects for street and or utilities. As part of this development, you can see a portion of Amber Avenue South was never constructed at the time when that project occurred, thus resulting in a deferred assessment. Part of this development, they have dedicated that portion of the right-of-way and will construct that with Lot 1, Block 1. Then the remaining the first half of the other deferred assessments, roughly $66,000, will be paid at closing when the plat is recorded, and then the remainder $65,000 will be in this deferred assessment. What that means is once Outlot A is further developed, that will trigger paying that $65,000. Or if it reaches 10 years, that amount will be due. So we've established now retaining the deferred assessments, which we do not budget for annually, and essentially it's a little bonus for us in our street fund that now we do need, or we get these deferred assessments paid. So establishing a timeline for when the final assessment will be paid, but then paying half up right up front. So I did want to highlight that. That's part of the approval as well. With that, I'd ask you to open the public hearing and I'll answer any questions that you may have afterwards. Thank you.
We will open the public hearing for preliminary and final plat of Vantage Point. Anyone wishing to testify, please step forward, state your name, address, and affiliation. Second call, anyone wishing to testify? Third and final call, anyone wishing to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Council, any questions on the preliminary and final plat in front of us? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion. I'll make that motion. There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Congratulations. All right, we are on to consent items. We have 9 items on the consent. Is there a motion or any that want to be pulled for further discussion?
I'd make a motion to approve.
A motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those carry. And our last action item, we have financial policies, hotel investment community grant.
All right, you're almost done listening to me for the evening. If you recall back to March 10th, we discussed at a council workshop where we provided information on a reduced whack and sack, or well, I forget what we titled it, but a reduced whack and sack program. From that discussion, we further refined where we wanted this money to be allocated to, and directed staff to develop a hotel investment grant as an alternative approach to incentivize hotel development in Sartell, rather than just reducing whack and sack fees via the community grant. So I will walk through what we have put together from that, and also refer you to page 54 of the actual financial policies to see how it relates in our policies, but I'll walk through the general program overview. So requirements are net new hotel development, so it would exclude any additions of just creating some rooms. Must be located within Sartell city limits, as we do require our other community grants. At least 80 rooms or keys, they're often referred to, and create at least 15 new jobs. This program would expire by July 1, 2028, or when the $40,000 is spent, which is from our Economic Development Fund. The source of the funds have always been from that Economic Development Fund, because if you go back, we had money put in there from a previous community development director while we had that vacancy, so that was where that money was coming from. So whichever occurs first, whether it's 2028 or when the money is spent. I know we talked about a tiered grant amount because that's how our childcare grant is structured. However, the pro forma would likely not support additional rooms above 80 or much above 80. You're looking 80 to 90. As well as a small amount of funding we have available. We only have $40,000 to allocate to this program. And just from preliminary discussions, thorough discussions with developers, you're looking at a $14-15 million project overall. So having, yes, any amount of money matters, but having 10 or 15,000 allocated, depending on the project, wouldn't really move on the spectrum very much. So application process and requirements, obviously they need to submit a completed application, must submit site plans, purchase agreements to show that they actually have proof of site control or own the land is important. They should have a business plan outlining their project feasibility and construction timelines and schedules, which further goes into the details provided. The funds would actually only be dispersed upon approval and payment of the building permit. The building permit must be submitted with 1 year of the approval from council, and then the project must be completed within 3 years. If not complete, they'd be required to reimburse the city for that amount. I know we talked about other programs that we could utilize, but keep in mind that we don't allow mixing city incentives. And when I mean incentives, I mean tax abatement or TIF. Due to our location, we actually do not qualify for TIF for a hospitality or hotel development just because of our pure location. So even if the city wanted to, state statute prohibits us. So abatement is our only option. Most of the pro forma for hotels would require some sort of abatement. When we looked at a project, you're looking at about $40,000 for city tax abatement a year. So just keep that in mind that right now we don't allow mixing city incentives, meaning this grant and abatement. So most often, if they saw this and we're looking at this compared to abatement, abatement would be chosen just because that is over a period of time. So just keep that in mind as well. We don't allow stacking on any other community grants, but I just wanted to make sure that there is an option. However, we don't allow it on any other grants to stack some of those incentives such as tax abatement and a community grant. That is what I have presented for you from the direction from the council workshop. I'd take any questions that you may have.
Help me understand what's the special selection of July 1st, 2028?
It just mirrors a child care grant, so
okay.
That can always be changed.
I guess council, that's one thing I'd advocate that we do. I mean, if we leave it at 2028, they conceivably could not open until 2031 if my math is right. And I just think as we sit here in 2025, there's a lot that could change. I would rather us shorten the window and then based on demand have to extend it versus have it out there and, end it earlier, create any confusion out in the marketplace from a developer perspective. I'd also say I fully agree with Carrie. I don't know that it's the golden ticket to get hotel development here, but I do believe it's a very proactive approach. much as we saw with the childcare, I didn't believe from a dollars and cents that the childcare grant would actually have a material impact, but we saw a lot of buzz and a lot of activity and shovels go in the ground. So I wouldn't want to dismiss what this could create for hotel development. Other thoughts?
I would agree to move it forward. Have it sooner than later.
Carrie,
We need a hotel in Sartell. I think we need it sooner than later. I think this would be one I would consider suggesting we allow to be stacked for this grant specifically as an extra incentive on top of the abatement. You know, we're gonna go out and compete and it's something that right now it's right on the fence of people looking to say, do we have enough business to actually keep this thing full during the week? So right now we're kind of on the fence with some, you know, the ability to bring in and attract that into town. So the more that we can do to bring that here and really keep a lot of those dollars in town when we have a lot of other facets of bringing in leisure and kids sports and all the things that we bring into town. Supporting our local restaurants and some of those things to keep them here in town, I think is very important, and we would see that come back to us just in business generation in the city from my perspective.
Jed, with your concept of stacking it, is there could we break that 40 into 220 grant opportunities?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I mean, I think 40 is probably pretty low on a $15 million project of incentivizing, right? It's not a huge dollar. Can we afford to bring 2 hotels into town from a business perspective? If we believe the business is there, I would support splitting it and trying to attract more. But
Yeah, I guess my mind goes to if we're talking tax abatement is likely needed as part of the pro forma in general. If one comes in, does the second one say we missed our opportunity on the 40 versus again for the pro forma to work tax abatement, and then they could compete for 2 options. I don't know. I guess that's where my mind goes, is just how do we, I think we would all love for 1, but would love even more for 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's incentive or not.
Yeah, I mean, from what Anna said in her email and what the hotel study showed us, we're talking about, is there enough demand to fill up 1 right now? So I don't know that we're going to get 2. And unless we stack it, which I wasn't thinking of, I was thinking if we just did what our policy is, that you can't mix and match, if you will. I was wondering whether this even made sense anymore, if tax abatement is the preferred incentive that hotels would look for. But I guess if you want to talk about stacking, then it's a different thing. But then, Ryan, I would say I think the 40 is more attractive to the 1 hotel we're likely to get, rather than just give 20 and the other 20 would probably expire at a certain time.
Mayor, if I could add, from the hotel study, yes, it shows that 1, we could sustain 1, and during the week, obviously, is our issues of filling those rooms. However, it doesn't mean that the possibility of 2 is null and void and will never happen. However, I think that would be further down the road than what we're talking right now, which is important to understand. But definitely, if you're facing these 2 items, they will 100% choose tax abatement because they're getting roughly $40,000 year over year until that abatement's complete just from city taxes. So.
Rob, was the funding of this, obviously, and how this fund got created, will that funding be available to replenish this account over time, or is this it?
So as Carrie mentioned, it was Community and Economic Development Fund is being funded through the vacancy of our Community and Economic Development Director over the past couple of years. So since we filled that, we're no longer budgeting money from the general fund into the Community Economic Development Fund. So it's currently not being replenished, but not to say there isn't an option for us to levy taxes into it in future years if we see it as a priority and want to incentivize communities coming into our business. So there are options, not currently in our capital improvement plan. There would be some opportunity costs there, but there are ways we could continue to fund it. But it has been historically the vacancy.
Can I follow up on that?
Yep.
Rob, Nikki, I know that you both are aware the hospitality tax is rolled into what fund and what is that allocated for?
Yes. So we get a percent of tax from the American Inn in Sartell, being our only lodging. That, by ordinance, can be used for tourism and marketing of the city.
I think that's actually state statute that requires that.
Yeah.
And that's about 30,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know how many rooms are at the American Inn or their occupancy, but certainly one additional hotel, likely much larger in scale than, and here it'd be 80 keys. I mean,
Right, so
there's a revolving fund that would be created from the hotel tax that would continue to drive, again,
And that is-
tourism marketing related.
Separate from this fund.
okay,
Correct.
so
So
it's
you're talking about
separate,
two
two
separate.
separate funds.
Yep.
But that fund then could be used in marketing and hospitality. How we define that is,
Today, the Everything Sartell Committee Board reviews that, makes recommendations. I think our biggest splash with that in the past was lights at Pinecone Central Park.
Sorry, I'll jump in. Correct, Ryan. That's where we've used the big chunk of it. Otherwise, it's in minor things like marketing, getting businesses to get their name in front of visitors, that type of thing. But pretty low as far as our total budget. We definitely don't spend all of it.
We are reviewing at Wednesday's meeting, however, you might recall that council approved a portion of the Mill District owner's rep to be paid with those hotel tax funds.
yeah, I
So
was thinking that.
for 2025, it's approximately 30,000, 31,000. And then if we're not able to budget enough consultant dollars in 2026, just depending on how budgets shake out, that would be another like 42, 43,000. So just hold that as a placeholder in your mind right now, that some of those dollars are spoken for. But to Mayor Fitzen's point, that fund does self-generate itself year over year, 30,000. And then if you build another hotel, presumably another 30 to 40. We've seen almost 40,000 a year 2 years ago at American Inn. So
And is that based on how many rooms or?
it's based on
The revenue.
their revenue.
It's
Yep.
a line item tax on the
Reservations.
thing there.
One other point, and Carrie kind of alluded to this, that I wanted to just make sure to call out is that hotel study was done in 21, and so that would have been pre-Niron. And I don't know what kind of impact Niron will have on hotel stays, but part of that hotel study was measuring what will be the daytime traffic, and I would imagine that would have an impact. So I know right now that hotel study only calls for one hotel, but to Carrie's point, that could change, maybe not in the timeline that we're talking about this investment program, but it doesn't include the impact that Niron would have, and I don't know what that would be.
It also was Centricare investments of
And Centricare Med School,
nearly
yeah.
$1 billion in our medical area. Again, that's Sartell and St. Cloud. There's a lot of concepts coming out that I've learned through Centricare of overnight stays where you would actually have a hotel room that is directly communicating back to for patient care. So have a hip surgery, rather than driving all the way home, you would stay at the hotel and would be transported to and from the hotel for follow-up care. They can monitor in your room. We are likely in a great geographical area for that, with the med school, with the massive plaza, and then situated right between the plaza, all of that, and the hospital. And so, again, I think there's a lot of opportunity. You could probably make the point that, hey, if we divide it into two and it's 20,000 and 20,000, is it really going to move the needle? Maybe not.
So I follow on that, can I follow up on that? If we're talking about a hotel incentive, $40,000 is, well, it's not gonna change much. 20,000 probably won't be incentivized. I mean, people will take it because it's nice to pay for fees or building permit or whatever it happens to be. But I don't think if you broke it down into 20 and 20, I just think you'd probably need to, if you're gonna get a second hotel in this market, even though the school is new from the study, the Nairon is new, there's a lot of significant growth in Sartell that's happening. That 80 to 120 is what that market study really pushes for this market right now. One hotel breaks ground and moves forward. The conventional financing market will look at that and say, that's about all I can handle. So they're not gonna, I mean, just knowing the market area in that area, like big commercial banks will look at that and say, I think one's too many. I mean, Jed, you could probably talk to it on that side of things. You're gonna study that and go, boy, am I gonna jump in bed with this program with, you know, I already got a 120 or 80 unit building coming on board. What's the chance of success for a second one? It's a 5 to 10 year window probably till that second hotel has any viability financially, is what kind of seems to be the trend right now. And if we have a hotel, as you stated a couple times, that are on the hook, Ryan, that might be here, is this program incentivized? Did it make them come to town? I mean, if it isn't even in place yet, how do they take advantage of that? I mean, we're drawing attention from hotel people without this program in place. So how do we move forward now after the fact and say part two is in, I mean, I guess it has to depend on the schedule of this current hotel.
Put an expiration date on it. Move forward.
Yeah, I think we try to incent the timeline to get it so that's not sitting in concept land for 4 or 5 years as, hey, we're very serious, but we have 4 other markets we're looking at. Is any way that we can get it to move from a timeline perspective?
Yeah, with that, I mean, if there's support for it, I would say let's shorten that timeline to 1 year from today. In the bottom text or details, we still allow them to complete construction within 3 years, but I don't want to be, if we're putting a lot of energy into attracting a hotel, and I don't want to sit here a year from now saying, hey, how else do we do this, and where else can we dangle a carrot? If this 40,000 isn't going to do it in the first year, then it's probably not enough to do it, and we'll have to figure out a different game plan.
I would agree by shortening the window.
Someone interested in making a motion on the
Can I
item?
ask one more question?
Yeah.
So if we move forward with this, how will we decide between multiple applications? Like, what's the criteria outside of this? Do we need more criteria here to make that decision? Should 2 or 3 come in, but within a year?
How have we done that or thought through that in the past?
In the past, similar to the child care grant, it was first come, first serve basis.
And is that first come, first served to submit a building plan or apply for the grant, or?
Apply for the grant to meet the requirements and then council approval. So following that, with a stricter timeline of 1 year from today, you're only going to have so many that are ready to meet the application process and requirements. So that's already limiting it. But just to clarify, I know we did talk about, or Jed, you spoke about compounding this with abatement options. If that is direction, just further clarification on that.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Obviously, that's still an approval process by itself, separate of this, but yes.
Okay.
When you said it's an approval process,
Well, the abatement conversation would, just because you get the grant, I mean, the grant can be stacked, but that's
and we
Okay.
haven't had a request
So-
yet, so.
Okay, gotcha. I was gonna say, so, I mean, we're not, I mean, do we have to change our policies to allow that? Or can we just decide right now that this is what we wanna do and that's good? We could have it as part of this hotel investment grant.
We would just have to change where it's redlined in here, that's saying that you could, stack it with another city incentive and then change the expiration date that we have there, and say it's only specific to this incentive or community grant. And just know that the tax abatement is a separate application process, like you said, Jed, a separate approval, that takes its own time, so having this being able to stack does make sense from that perspective, so you're not delaying projects.
Council, is there a motion? The motion could be to approve, could be to deny, could be to table, but we don't act without a motion, so.
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. I'll jump in front before you ask for a second. Do you want it as your motion as stated or with any
The amended of moving the date up,
moving the date up?
1 year.
1 year from today's date,
Sure.
okay, and then being able to stack it with other incentive, city offered incentives, okay.
You wanna say April 1st just to be, rather than the 14th? I don't know if that plays into it or not.
Can we do May 1st?
Sure.
Okay.
I guess we're going longer than a year then.
Okay.
Alright, so there's a motion, with what is presented, date amended to May 1st of 2026. And there was one other, and allowing to be stacked. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
With a motion and a second, further discussion?
I probably have to abstain from the vote.
We have one abstaining. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 4-0 with one abstain. All right, council, on to administrator and department incidental reports. We just have the administrator. Next council meeting, we will have the full 2024 annual reports. Anything for admin? Seeing none, thank you. Council announcements. Tim,
Nothing tonight.
Pat,
Nothing?
Rusty, Jed.
Nothing.
Only item I have is Memorial Day service at the community center. If you are able to join from the council, let me know. Get those RSVPs in. And that is all I have. Look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
We're adjourned.